I feel like whenever I'm working on a drawing, the first 3/4 of it is relatively easy because you know what to do. It's obvious. Like if I'm drawing a portrait and the nose is really fuzzy and undefined, I know I got to go in and put in a shadow. I know I have to make the highlights stronger. That's very straightforward. And I think it's when you get to that like last 10% when I go, shoot, what do I do now? You don't want to do too much because you worry that you're going to over-labor it. But then you think, what if I stop too early? Then it looks unfinished. So for me, it's so ambiguous and it drives me up the wall.
I'm actually quite the opposite. I find the hardest part for me is the beginning because I plan so thoroughly and I think through it that if I don't get started, like it's hard for me to get started essentially. And once I get rolling, I can just finish it.
But how can you be so definitive about I'm done?
When you work with three-dimensional work like jewelry, you kind of get to a point where there's not much more you can actually do to it.
Is that because of the limitation of the material? Because the metal just won't do more?
Yeah, I polished it to where I need to. I mean, sometimes getting the right finish on the metal is actually kind of hard to determine. So I'll either take a step away from it and then come back and see if it needs anything else. Because when you're staring at something for hours, it gets challenging. Or I will ask for a second opinion.
I've sort of set up my entire artistic process as a cartoonist to combat that because cartooning is broken up into stages where you do the thumbnail sketches, then you do pencils, then you do inks. If you're doing a color comic, you color it. I do my professional illustrations the same way. I can kind of figure out when I'm done at each stage. The real problem, though, is when you get to that last stage, when I have the inks finished. If I don't like them, I can spend days like fiddling with them in Photoshop or like cleaning them up with white gouache. I get very nitpicky, so it's easy for me to just fix my line work until it looks dead and horrible.
One of the signals to me that I'm almost finished is when I'm not really making any changes. I'm just doing a little here, a little there, and nothing's really happening.
Yeah.
I just want to keep working on it, but sometimes nothing's really improving or changing very much.
There have definitely been pieces where I've spent too much time fixing things and my brushwork starts to look dead. And like a lot of people think that I do a lot of my work on the computer, which isn't true. It's just that I get really crazy. Why would you work in ink if you didn't get some of that nice brush quality?
The imperfect is almost in right now. That obviously handmade look that you see with all the pottery.
There's something so nice about the quality of just a mark that's made with no fuss. And I do make those marks. It's just I then go back in with gouache and ruin those marks. The thing that really I can spend a lot of time on, especially my professional illustration work, that takes me so long to do is like the color. I was someone that was so afraid of color for so long and then found that when I entered the professional illustration industry, people want color, so I have to figure that out, especially coloring in Photoshop where you can just change things really easily.
Oh, endlessly.
It'll take me a day to finish coloring a piece.
Maybe the material that you're working in to a certain degree determines how fussy or not fussy you are. Because the thing is, I work in drawing a lot, but I also do a lot of printmaking. And the thing is, when you have a printing press and you roll something through the press and then you pull this piece of paper off, there's this like flourish in the end. You know that thing in the Olympics where the gymnasts like put their arms up because they like finished a routine?
Yeah.
I feel like that's what printmaking is like because you pull the paper off, I'm like, I'm done. And the thing is, in drawing, I can always go back. And in painting, it's the same way. You can always do more. But I rarely do more to the actual print. Like I may go back and rework a plate and maybe adjust things. But printmaking doesn't give me the same problems that drawing does. With drawing, I'm running around in circles and I'm questioning myself. And sometimes to me, the point that I stop is like, I can't just look at this anymore. I'm just so sick of it. I'm like, done. I just walk away, which doesn't sound very romantic or resolved, but I think it just gets to a point like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when you are working on it and you're not really adding anything anymore or changing anything that anybody can actually notice besides you is when I would say I need to stop on something.
There's definitely a point that I always reach with a piece that I've been working on for too long where I just want to run away from it. I just hate it so much. And that's usually for me when I know that I'm done.
Do you ever go back to it? Like, do you ever say, oh my God, I can't stand this, wait a few weeks and then go back? Or is it just, you're gone?
It's so much easier to have a deadline than to just be working on personal work for that reason, because you could always keep perfecting that personal work.
I was talking about how easy it is for me to finish a piece, but it's so challenging to know when I'm done planning for a piece, when I'm ready to stop making models, stop making mock-ups, and just go for it. Because at some point, you need something physical. You can't just turn in theoretical work.
If I don't do the proper amount of planning on the front end of the process, I have to spend more time being nitpicky at the end of the process because I have to fix everything that I didn't plan out that well.
I feel like being too set on a plan doesn't leave room to adjust if it's not working. So it's always good to maybe have a general direction and have a lot of things planned out, but if it's not working, don't be afraid to then alter when necessary.
Sometimes I think it just comes down to you kind of have to give yourself a time limit. Sometimes just stepping away from it, coming back to it and looking at it, you can tell immediately whether or not it's done.
I need a sarcastic mark now.
Okay, sarcastic mark. You. No, in front of your face. That sounded like it hurt.
It did hurt.